Hey guys, it's your average middle-aged American back again with another reaction video. This one is going to be a walking tour in Madrid, Spain. This was put in my comments section by one of my viewers, and I really do appreciate it. Anytime you guys have a video you think I should check out, please put it down in the comment section, and I will do my best to check it out. And if I think it's going to be interesting, I'll review it. Regardless, I do appreciate the effort. Just did a bunch of videos on castles and cathedrals in Spain, England, Germany. I think those are the main three. Anyway, there's a playlist for castles and cathedrals. There's a playlist for each country. There's a playlist for Europe. If you're new to my channel, it's anything and everything that interests me as an average middle-aged American, learning about other countries and other cultures, mostly focused on Europe. Wife and I plan to do a lot of visiting in Europe, so trying to learn as much as we can before we go. Anyway, we're almost to 1,000 subscribers, which is the goal. I think we're about 800 right now, and 80%. That's great. So if we can get there, that would be wonderful. If you're not a subscriber already, click that button. It doesn't cost you anything. Helps me out. Thumbs up goes a long way with the old algorithm, and I appreciate all of you. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate the education, the information, the travel tips, kind words. Appreciate all of you. Anyway, enough jibber jabber. Let's get to it and see what it's like to walk around in Madrid.
Hey Spain lovers, James Blick here. Now, anyone who knows me well knows that after food, my second love is history. And when I moved to Madrid 9 years ago from New Zealand, a relatively young country, I fell in love with the history of Madrid and of Spain. I began to devour it. So today I'm going to take you on my highlights of historic Madrid walking tour. I'm going to show you my favorite key sites, tell you the stories behind them. I'm going to take you to some secret stops as well that I love and not many people know about. And I'm going to try and make it interesting because I know history can be boring, but I'm going to do my best. So venga, let's go.
Very cool. There'll be a description down below for his channel. If you're not familiar with him, I think I've done another video, or maybe even two, from his channel. So the fact that he was also recommended to me by a viewer is a reassurance that he knows what he's talking about.
Madrid is such a fascinating city to explore. Sprawling plazas, historic restaurants, grand palaces, hidden corners, dark stories of missing bodies, and shocking tales of the Spanish Inquisition. The history of the Spanish capital has it all. Today we're going to cover over 1,100 years of history. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of vermouth and settle in.
1,100 years of history. I'm sitting in my 60-year-old house thinking about all the problems that I need to fix. You know, our air conditioner went out, and we got to put a new roof on because of our insurance company, even though the roof's not leaking. Welcome to America. And then you think about 1,100 years and the buildings that are still standing. You know, I think of America and I'm like, okay, so what are we, 300 years? Not even. We'll round up 300 years. Now we're talking about 1,100 years, which isn't all of it. It's just the last 1,100 years. It's really, it's hard to grasp. You got to understand, I'm 53 years old. Nope, I'm 54 years old. And I've never been to Europe, you know. I've been to the Caribbean. I've been to Mexico. I've been to Canada. I've been to different states in America. Been to Alaska. Never been to Europe. So when I look at an old fort in Puerto Rico, you know, something like that, that's amazing to me. So when we go and we check out these castles and these cathedrals and stuff, it's just gonna, I'm gonna have to have an oxygen tank or something because it's just gonna be insane. Plus, I like photography, which means that I'm going to just, I'm going to have to try so hard to not look like an American tourist. It's not going to be easy. But it is what it is. Can't wait.
And what better place to start
Look
than
at that.
exactly where it all began, right here in front of Madrid's Royal Palace, because this is exactly where my adopted city was founded. And first things first, this palace is the largest still functioning royal palace in the world. Now, the king and queen don't live here, but it's still used for official ceremonies. Now,
this is how ignorant I am, okay? And I don't need insults. Okay, if you notice, there's not a lot of insults in my comment section. That's because most of my subscribers are European. Most of them understand that I'm coming from America with humility. I never said I knew a lot about Europe. That's the whole point of the channel, is to learn about Europe. I didn't know Spain had a king and a queen. I just didn't know that. Now, is that your real government? I mean, did they rule, or are they just kind of a, you know, a figure? Kind of like the king and queen of, you know, king or queen in England. Let me know. But look at that place. So I assume that's just a government facility still. They just don't live there. But they use the floor space for government affairs. It's beautiful. And it's interesting that you can just kind of walk right up to it. Like, it's not gated off or anything. I get it, they're probably inside of some kind of a gate, but do they have security measures before you get in this courtyard area, this plaza area?
see if you can guess how many rooms they have in this palace. Look, nobody knows.
I'm gonna guess 1, 2, 3 stories. 1, 2, 3. Well, you got at least 50 per side. So I'm going to say front and back's 100. Sides are probably 25, so I'm going to say 150. And then I imagine you have it, I'm going to call it 200. Probably have another 50 interior rooms, closets and such, storage areas. I'm going to go with 200.
For sure. It's between 2,800.
What?
I've read 3,400. Nobody's quite sure.
So I guess if you get a window, you're pretty important. I have a hard time believing there's 3,000 rooms. Okay, let's average this out. What is it, like 3,100? The United States Capitol, which is where Congress is, has 540 rooms, and the White House only has like 140. So you're telling me this thing is got 6 times as many rooms as the Capitol building, which the Capitol has like 500 government officials, 435 or something government officials from the Congress and the Senate, from the House of Representatives and the Senate. So 540. And you'd have to do that 6 times, 5 or 6 times. That's insane. I can't even believe, especially for the height. Because it only looks like it's only 3 stories high, I think. Probably a basement. I don't know if you guys have basements? You know, a level below the ground. Is that normal in Spain? Let me know. So you have 3 or 4 floors. So you're talking 700 rooms per floor minimum? Wow. Anybody ever been in this place? If so, let me know. I mean, it's like, it would have to, you could walk miles just on the inside of it, just getting from one end to the other end. I wonder if do they have one of those motorized things like they do at the airport where you just stand on it? It's like an escalator, but it goes horizontal instead of vertical. You'd almost have to. Or golf carts driving around, picking up people. Or segways. I mean, let's get practical. If you're going from one end to the other end to deliver things or to have meetings or whatever, that's quite the walk. Wow. I guess 200 rooms. Silly American.
But it's enormous. And here's an important date. Nobody has lived in this palace since 1931. Hold on to that date. It'll come up again later. So I said Madrid was founded here, but when and by who? You might have heard of the Moors. That was a mixture of Berbers and Arab elite who were living in northern Morocco and invaded Spain in the 8th century. And they built here in the 9th century a fortress, a defensive castle. Now the Christians were battling to retake Spain, what's called the reconquest of Spain. But they built this here because they could see the mountains to the north, and that way they could see the Christians driving over the mountains, the Guadarrama mountains. But look, the Christians did come, and in the 11th century they captured the fortress, they captured what was the military outpost, and then installed themselves in the fortress, and Madrid began to grow as more of a village, of a town. But you're probably thinking, James, this doesn't look anything like a 9th century Moorish fortress. So what happened? Well, what happened is in 1734, the fortress, it caught fire. Supposedly a candle in the artist's studio fell over, and it burned for 4 days. Well, we lost the building, but it was full of wonderful artworks because the kings and queens of Spain had been great collectors of the arts, and they were throwing the artworks out the windows to save it. And the basis of what today is the collection in the Prado is effectively the art that was saved from the burning palace or burning fortress. And then they built this guy in the 18th century, which is kind of a little bit sort of French, a little bit Italian. To be honest, not my favorite palace in the world, but if you visit it, the armory is very, very cool. Okay, and before we head off, let me tell you about this guy up on the horse. This is Philip IV. He was a king who lived in the old palace, the one that burnt down. And see, he wanted a sculpture of himself on a horse with the horse rearing up on its hind legs. So he got his sculptor, an Italian guy called Tacca, to do it. But Tacca couldn't figure out how to do it because nobody had been doing sculptures in Europe with men on horses where the horse was effectively balanced on its hind legs. What looks simple today was really hard at the time. So I love this story. Tacca wrote to a friend of his, a fellow Italian, and you'll have heard of this guy, Galileo Galilei. And Galileo gave him the exact equation of the angle of the horse and told him how to construct the sculpture so that the horse would be balanced. Here's what he said. You've got to balance it on 3 points at the back, which means the 2 legs and the tail. And he also said the front had to be hollow and the back had to be solid. And Galileo said that if you do it like that, it will stand forever. And so far so good. Almost 400, 300 and a bit years later? No, 400, 300 and a bit years later. Still going.
Wow.
So here in the Plaza de Ramales is one of the hidden little secrets of Madrid that not many people know about. So this might look like a quiet little square with a few tapas bars and terraces, but right now we're standing in the middle of what was once a church that was here. You can see these outlines here. They look like little benches for people to sit on, but it's actually the outline of a church that was here for hundreds of years until it was knocked down in 1810. Okay, so we knocked down the church. We lost an old building, but what else did we lose? But you'll see that someone really famous was buried here. You see, in 1660, Spain's most famous court painter, most famous painter, Diego de Velázquez, was buried here. Now, he's the guy whose works you're going to see in the Prado, like Las Meninas, the most famous artwork in the Prado is his, and he was buried beneath this church in the crypt. Now, in 1810, when they knocked the church down, they forgot to take him out before they did that, and so we lost any record of where his body was. Now, over the centuries, we've searched for Diego de Velázquez, including in 1999 was the last time they looked for him here. They were digging for months, and they couldn't find him. So we don't know where he is. And I tell you what, that's not the only famous missing Spanish body I'm going to tell you about today. I often say to people, don't die while you're in Madrid, because we might lose you. And I love this little grassy knoll or nook that's up above the palace beside Calle del Factor. Not many people come up here, and it's a great place to get photos and to get views of the royal palace, of the cathedral, and then in behind is the Casa del Campo. Now that's a huge public park now, but back in the day it was the king's old hunting grounds. Fascinating thing about the cathedral behind me is it took 110 years to build. Now, that would be normal when you're thinking 15th, 16th century, but it was finished only in 1993. Civil wars, bankruptcy, poverty all got in the way, and that's why it took so long to build. And now, yeah, if you're wandering around, head up here. Not many people know about this spot.
So, for all my internet friends in Spain, one city. Is Madrid the city? If you're going to have a friend come to Spain and you got to pick one city, they can only visit one. That's it. They can only visit one. They got 1 week. They can only stay in one city and only visit one city. Where do you tell them to go? Let me know down in the comment section.
And if you want,
I noticed in a lot of these shots too, it's cloudy and dark. Do you guys get a lot of rain? Is it one of those things like Ireland where it rains every day, but it only rains for 10 minutes and you never know when it's coming? Or is it... Let me know what your weather's like there. I know it gets really hot in the summer, but is it just a coincidence that he's filming on a dark, cloudy day? Or is that kind of a typical afternoon? Let me know.
Wandering around the Calle Mayor, you might turn a corner and see this guy. In fact, he's often given me a fright when I've been walking around here at night. You think he's real. He's not, but he looks very real, and he's called the Curious Neighbor. Now, what's he so curious about? What's he looking at? Well, there's not much to see, but beneath here are the remains of an old church that was knocked down when the Calle Mayor, the main street, was built. And here's the thing, that church was built on the remains of a mosque. Because remember, the Moors founded Madrid, and this was where their main mosque was. And something you need to know, if you touch his bum, it's good luck. If you're a little bit prudish, you can touch his shoulder. Not quite as good luck. So I love walking around this old part of Madrid around the palace. It's called Barrio de los Austrias, or Hapsburg Madrid. And this is the part that was really built up and important when the Habsburgs were in power. I'm talking about the guy on the horse, Philip IV, his son, Charles II. Now here's the thing, you're gonna see paintings of these guys in the Prado. And when you look at them, you're gonna think they look kind of funny looking people. That's because they were so inbred. The dynasty effectively died out in the year 1700 because the last in the line, Charles II, couldn't have any children because he was so inbred. There's so many stories about how he was kind of, I mean, poor guy, kind of funny looking, couldn't walk properly, couldn't talk properly. His 8 great-grandparents were descended from the same woman, and her name was Joanne the Insane. So that gives you an idea of the kind of bloodline. And so tucked into the Habsburg neighborhood is this San Nicolas Church, or St. Nicholas Church. It's from the 12th century, the 1100s, and it's the oldest church in Madrid that's still standing. And what I find fascinating about this is, look at that bell tower. Does it remind you of something? It kind of makes you think of Andalusia, of the Moors, of the Moorish architecture. Now, there may have been a mosque here as well, and the minaret was there, but also in the 12th century, the Christians were copying a lot of that Moorish style of architecture because it was in fashion, and so it's called mudéjar style. So very, very cool. A great little spot to discover. And now we're walking into one of my favorite little squares, La Plaza de la Villa, which literally means town square or village square a little bit. And what's so interesting about this square is that...
I assume these are all like apartments, right? All these windows? If not, let me know what they are. I don't see any signs or anything, so that I wouldn't think they're businesses unless they're, you know, professional businesses of some sort that don't need to advertise. Let me know. I mean, do people just live there? And do you rent them or do you buy them? It's really cool. It's really charming. You guys have any McDonald's in Madrid? Type. Silly American.
Almost 500 years ago, when Madrid was the capital of a global empire, this was one of the most important squares, if not the most important, in the city. So what I find fascinating about the square are the 3 buildings that surround it, each from a different century. So let me geek out for a sec. This guy up here was the Madrid Town Hall from 1693 right up until 2007. And then it got a little small. That's over 300 years. You'll notice the sloping roof. So this is Habsburg architecture. And the Habsburgs were from Austria. In Austria, it snows a lot. So that architecture, that sloping roof is so the snow can fall off. Doesn't snow much in Madrid. So if that's a 17th century building, if you swing it around a little bit, Yoli, down the back we have a building from the 16th century, and then over on the far side of the square you've got a building from the 15th century, one of the oldest still standing buildings in Madrid. You can see the style is much simpler from the old town hall in the 17th century. And what I find interesting about this really simple building is if you look up at the top, you've got these arches, these horseshoe-shaped arches, which again look like that Moorish style. It wasn't built by the Moors, but it was the Christians copying that style, the mudéjar style. So it was just fashionable at the time. All right, before we head into the most narrow street in Madrid. I want to tell you about this guy up here. So this guy up here on the statue is Álvaro de Bazán. Now he was the guy who was in charge initially of the famous Spanish Armada's invasion or attempted invasion of England in the 16th century. This guy was a great strategist, but he died a few months before the invasion, and the guy that the king appointed to take over was not such a good strategist and in fact suffered from seasickness. So the invasion of England was a complete disaster. But there's historians who say that if this guy had have lived, maybe us Kiwis, English people, Australians, anybody descendant from England would today be speaking Spanish.
Wow. There's a little tidbit of information for you. There are 40 million Americans that speak Spanish. Just thought you should know. We're not that far apart.
I love this extremely narrow street. You can almost touch the sides. So suddenly all the noise disappears, the noise of the Calle Mayor, and you're lost here in these old winding streets. And that's what I love about walking around old Madrid, that you'll turn a corner, it will become silent and so mysterious and wonderful. Such a great place to explore. So just at the top of Calle Cavabaja, that famous tapa street that I made a video about, you'll see on the wall this little slogan, which if you don't speak Spanish, you won't know what it means. Fui sobre agua edificada mis muros de fuego son. What it means is, over water my walls of fire were built. And this is a very old motto of Madrid going back centuries. And it refers to the fact that Madrid long ago, and maybe still today, I'm not quite sure, had underground aquifers running beneath it. In fact, the name Madrid possibly comes from an Arabic word meaning place of life-giving water, because remember, the founders of Madrid spoke Arabic. So that's why it's over water. But what are these walls of fire that it refers to? Well, that's because the old medieval walls of Madrid ran through here, and they were made with flint. And when an arrow hits flint, it sparks. So that's walls of fire. So over water, my walls of fire were built. That's Madrid for you.
Wow.
And guys, we're just about to walk past Botín.
I notice you guys have a lot of graffiti. Is that a big problem in Spain? And what's the solution to that? I understand that your crime is significantly lower on average than most of the states in the United States, but you clearly have a graffiti problem. Do they just not punish them enough, or are there not enough police to focus on, you know, lower nonviolent crimes? Let me know what the deal is with the graffiti. I'm just curious. It's a real shame that countries like this with so much history and so much architecture have to deal with this kind of stuff. And I'm just curious why they don't take it more seriously. Let me know.
Oldest still running restaurant in the world. I'll link to a video above that I made about the oldest restaurants in Madrid that you can check out. So we're now entering the square that you have to visit while you're here in Madrid. Everyone visits it, Plaza Mayor. Now, but let me give you some context on what this grand square is all about, because it's more than just a big square. It really speaks to the history of Madrid. So remember in the 11th century when the Christians captured what was then a military fortress, it kind of began to grow into a town, but it was always pretty small. But in 1561, Philip II, the King of Spain, decided something huge. He decided to make Madrid his capital. And a capital needs a big square, so Philip II decided to design this, the Plaza Mayor, for his new capital of the Spanish Empire. And there's a lot that's gone on here. And so all these benches that are in the square have images of all the things that have happened here over the years. So this one shows the bullfights that used to happen here before Madrid had its bull ring. Over here you can see a fire that happened. There's been 3 different fires in the square over the centuries. There's only one building that's original, and the other buildings have been built after the fact because of these fires. And tucked in here behind this woman feeding her baby, as you can see, images of the Inquisition. There were Inquisition trials here. Autos de fe, where effectively the people who'd been convicted by the Spanish Inquisition were brought here and they had to repent for their sins. Now, here is the thing. If you repented for your sins, you were given mercy, which means you were strangled and then burned outside the city walls. If you didn't repent, you just went straight outside the city walls and you were burned alive. So yeah, kind of a dark history that's happened here in the Plaza Mayor, but also lots of good things. Now it's the Christmas market as we lead up to Christmas. So a little bit of yin and yang, a little bit of dark and light. That's Madrid, that's Spain, right? That's Spanish history, that's what I love about it. Now I mentioned there have been 3 fires over the centuries here in the square, and the only building that remains from the 17th century is this one, the Casa de la Panadería. Originally, this is where all the bread was baked in the city to keep prices for bread stable. Nowadays, it's the Tourist Information Center. But what you should do is if you come to Madrid, you need to check out these murals. They look like they're hundreds of years old. They're not. They're only 2 or 3 decades, and they have wonderful mythological symbols in them. And see if you can find the cats running up the tower when you come, because that's a reference to Madrid, because if you're a 3rd generation Madrileño or Madrileña, you're called a cat. So yeah, lots hidden in these murals. Okay, we're going to leave the Plaza Mayor and we're going to go to another famous square which has a very different history.
I like the fact that they have this little market going on, but they used buildings that, you know, semi-complemented the area instead of just everybody having their own, you know, ragtag mismatch kind of thing. It looks like they kind of match the surrounding buildings. I'm never a fan when I'm looking at a billion-dollar palace and then there's all these, you know, pop-up tents and stuff everywhere. It just kind of cheapens everything. I think they did a good job, you know, making that blend in a little as well as they could.
So yeah, lots hidden in these murals. Okay, we're going to leave the Plaza Mayor and we're going to go to another famous square which has a very different history. This square, the Puerta del Sol, is the square of the people. It's long been a place of gathering where people came to meet each other, a place of protest. It was once lined with lots of cafes, and this building up behind me was once the post office, the source of all news. In fact, there's a saying that the news of an event reaches the Puerta del Sol before the event has even happened. And people used to come here to get gossip of what was happening in the city. Of all those famous old cafes, one still remains, La Mallorquina. I made a video which mentions it, and they have a delicious Napolitana. You have to try it while you're here. And as I say, it's long been a place of protest here in the Puerta del Sol, all the way from the beginning of the 19th century where the Madrileños rose up against the French occupying troops. You'll see paintings about that from famous Goya in the Prado, even to Occupy Madrid. Wow. You might think that the Occupy movement started in Wall Street, but no, it started right here in the Puerta del Sol in 2011. So the people behind me taking their photos, standing on a plaque on the square and actually queuing to have their photo taken, they're queuing up for the Kilometer Zero plaque, because this is where all the radial roads throughout Spain, the main highways, are measured from, because this was the post office back in the day. Nowadays, they say if you stand on that plaque, you will return. So when you're here, make sure you stand on it. Hopefully there's not going to be a queue when you're here though, so I'm not going to do it this time. And this clock up on the building behind us, this is the clock that everyone in Spain is watching at midnight on New Year's Eve. The square fills up and people are here with 12 grapes. And as the clock chimes 12 chimes just before we hit midnight, you eat a grape with each chime. And literally, I've been here in the square, it's packed. I've been sitting at Yoli's parents' place watching the TV, watching this, and all over Spain, everyone's watching this clock. And it's kind of like Times Square, I guess. So yeah, the Puerta del Sol, the People's Square, where it all happens. And this guy up here.
Why do you eat a grape? What is that for? Is it some kind of a prosperity thing, like royalty, you know, get fed grapes? Is that part of it, or is it a, you know, nutrition for the new year kind of thing? Tell me what the grape means. I have no idea. I've never heard that before.
Here with the big nose, he's a Bourbon. He's from the same dynasty as the current king of Spain. Now, this guy was a king in the 18th century, and when he arrived into Madrid, he was like, this place is kind of dirty. It needs some tidying up. So he paved the streets, he put in street lighting, hired street sweepers, but a lot of Madrileños fought back. They didn't want it to happen. They didn't want him to tidy up their city. So he said, can I just do a few streets and see what you think? He did a few streets, and they loved it. After that, he said, the Madrileños, the people from Madrid, are like little children. They cry when you wash their face. So if you need a little pit stop during your historic route, check out this place, La Casa del Abuelo. They're famous for their prawns. I actually made a video about them, which I'll link to above, but also they have an interesting history. This place is over 100 years old, and way back in the 20s and 30s, they were known for their sandwiches. It was also a shop. But then when the Spanish Civil War came in 1936, there was a bread shortage in Madrid. And so the owner of this place, El Abuelo, the grandfather, went down to the market and bought the cheapest thing he could find, prawns. And he started mixing them up with garlic and parsley and made this delicious gambas al ajillo dish, which they still do today. And so I love how the gastronomy of this place, the dish they serve, comes right out of a bread shortage in the Spanish Civil War. And speaking of the Spanish Civil War, there's someone I want you to meet. So this is my favorite statue in all of Madrid, here in the Plaza Santa Ana. It's Federico García Lorca, a very famous Spanish playwright and poet, and I just love the way he's holding that bird. And mystery surrounds the end of his life. He was murdered in 1936 at the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War, and his body was buried somewhere near Granada. They've searched for him multiple times and still haven't found it. He was killed either because he was gay or because of his left-leaning views, and this was a very dramatic time in the country's history. So remember I told you way back at the beginning at the Royal Palace that palace was last inhabited in 1931? Well, that's because in 1931 Spain became a republic, and it was quite a liberal republic. Church and state were separated. In 1933 women were given the vote, but 31 to 36 was a very tumultuous time in Spanish history. The left and the right were pulling on each other. There was a lot of chaos, and in 1936 Franco, a general in the army, staged a coup to take over the republic and sort of pull Spain back into its more traditional past, and that coup failed and became the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939. And so in 1936, at the outbreak of that civil war, he was murdered and his body was buried somewhere. Again, a missing body. Like Velázquez, we have no idea where it is. And he's here because here in the Plaza Santa Ana is the entry point to the Barrio de las Letras, or Huertas, the literary quarter, the area where so many famous writers have lived and died. And I'm going to introduce you to another one in a moment who's also missing. Before we head off, I want to tell you about this building behind me. So presiding over the Plaza Santa Ana is this grand hotel. Now this hotel was where the bullfighters famously used to come and get dressed before bullfights. Manolete, the most famous bullfighter of the 20th century, used to come here and get his suit on before going to the bull ring. And also he would sleep here, always in the same room. And this square is a much more peaceful square compared to the Plaza Mayor or the Puerta del Sol. So if you want to come and just hang out, there's a children's playground, have a drink. It's really nice to sit in the sun. All right, let's dive into the Barrio de las Letras. So the most famous Spanish author who lived here in Huertas, or in the literary quarter, was Miguel de Cervantes. He lived here in the 16th and 17th century, and he wrote, well, see if you can guess, Don Quixote, the man from La Mancha, the man who was tilting at windmills, fighting giants with his sidekick Sancho Panza. And he lived here in 3 different houses, always renting, always a poor artist, never owned his own house, which is, typical of any kind of artist, I guess. And then we're going to go down and see where he might be buried. It's all a bit unclear and a bit vague. Remember, we lose bodies here in Madrid.
I guess so.
Cervantes was buried in this Trinitarian convent in 1616, the year he died. Interesting, it's the same year that Shakespeare died. He was buried here, or he wanted to be buried here, because the Trinitarian order actually paid his ransom to get him out of prison when he was a POW in Algiers for 5 years. So really interesting background, Cervantes. He was a soldier as well before he was a famous writer. And so he was buried here, and then over the years they kind of reformed the convent a little bit, did some renovation works, and they lost his body. Now, suddenly in 2011, a historian said that he was going to look for him. He wanted to do a study to see if they could trace his body and then go inside and dig. And then in 2015, they turned up a piece of wood from a coffin that had nails spelling MC into it. And so everyone thought, we've found Miguel de Cervantes' body, he's in here. Well, there was a little bit of doubt. Another historian said maybe it said MG, and that maybe it wasn't as old as Cervantes was when he was buried here. And so in the end, they did declare that they had found pieces of Cervantes' remains, but there was a little bit of skepticism from other historians. So it all kind of just dissipated a little bit, and I'm not quite sure if we found him or not. But anyway, you can never get into this place anyway to see where he might be. So it's kind of part of the beauty of the mystery of Madrid. Did we find Cervantes? Did we not? Does it really matter? So guys, if you keep walking down the hill at the bottom of the literary quarter, you'll hit the Prado Museum. Now, that is a place you have to visit when you're here in Madrid. And my favorite artist in the Prado is Goya, Francisco de Goya. For me, the greatest Spanish painter. Now, we do know where Goya's body is. It's down by the Madrid's river. But he died in Bordeaux in the 1820s, and in the later 19th century, when they decided to dig him up and bring him home, guess what? His head was missing. Where's his head? Who knows?
Well, there you go, guys. That's a great video. I mean, I like that a lot. I'm going to have to check out some more of his videos, and you need to go check out some more of his videos. I think he does a great job. It's not boring, but it's informative. It doesn't just glance over things and give me a bunch of drone shots. That's a great video. I hope he's doing other cities in Spain. Let me know the one city. If you could only visit or have a friend who's never been to Spain, he can only visit one city. He'll be there for a week. Can't leave the city, surrounding area. What city would you pick? Is Madrid the city? Let me know. If you're new to my channel, it's anything and everything that interests me as an average middle-aged American. That includes learning about other countries and other cultures, defending America when necessary against misinformation or opinions based on misinformation. And I appreciate all of you guys. Let's get to 1,000 subscribers. If you haven't subscribed already, hit that button. If you're already subscribed, I can't thank you enough. Like I said, most of my subscribers are actually European. I don't know when my videos will hit the American market, but who knows? Maybe never. And that's okay with me, because I learned quite a bit from you guys. And I do appreciate all the comments and all the travel tips and all the information. You know, it would take me decades to research everything I need to know about Europe. You guys give me the important stuff, and it helps quite a bit. The cliff notes, if you will. So I do appreciate all of you. I will continue to look at some other videos by this gentleman and I believe his wife, and we'll go from there. Until next time, take care of yourself. I do appreciate you. I will see you soon. Take care.